Okay, so here we are back for another in my time-lapse model build series. It's been a while since I've released any of these kits, or any of these videos, I should say. But I'm at the point with these next 4 kits that I can start releasing one. So the first one here, if you've read the title, you'll know, is the Modelcraft F-82, but I'm building it as a G. So this is a box for another kit I have. I have 3 total. 2 will be done with these time-lapse videos. This is an extra one that I have kicking around for, I don't know what. At some point I'll do something with it. Anyways, this is the only boxed kit I had. Both kits that I'm working on, including this one you'll see in this video, are bagged kits. I got them like this, with just photocopied instructions and no decals. On eBay a number of years ago. This one I purchased locally from a collector who was cleaning out his stash. So the one I'm doing, I decided to do it up as a G model. I purchased a couple of 3D printed parts in order to convert it to the G, including the Night Fighter exhausts and the radar, excuse me, the radar pod. So this was part 1 of the construction. You'll see the process of the build up to the point that it is primed and ready for paint. The rest, excuse me. As I was saying, this video you'll see the construction up to the point of it being primed and ready for paint. The second half of the build, where I complete the model, will be in part 2. It's probably going to be a few months after this video releases before the part 2 releases. However, down in the description, you will find a link to part 2 once it gets released. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. And as always, if you guys have any questions, concerns, anything like that, down below in the description, in the comments, I should say, by all means, leave some comments. Let me know what you're thinking. If you have questions on the build, anything like that, there is a kit review. I'll put a link up above to the kit review for this kit if you have any questions on that side of things. And let's jump right into this. And as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. So it's about time we got to start on this F-82. So this is the G model. I have quite a bit of aftermarket to use on this kit. A lot of it is just going to live off to the side until it is time to actually use things. Just gotta make sure I don't lose track of where I'm putting things, because this I don't need, this I don't need, this I don't need. So I think the first thing I'm gonna do is work on these. I've used one of these before as a test. These are 3D decals. Yeah, like I said, I've never really used them before on a kit, so it's going to be interesting to see how they work. It's going to make a huge difference on this kit for sure, because the detail on this is extremely soft. So I'm going to start just by trimming out a few of the pieces that I will need to do. So right off the top, we've got, now this is for Modelsvit, just a caveat at the very beginning. These were designed for the Modelsvit kit. I'm going to try to modify them to fit this Modelcraft kit. So it's a little bit more work because you kind of have to figure out what side each piece is for. Anyways, I'm going to start by cutting out, effectively, I want to cut out the fuselage, all 4 fuselage halves, as well as the instrument panel and this, well, not necessarily the seats, because I don't have to do anything except paint those. But these are gonna need a little bit of modification, potential modifications, to make everything fit. So it looks like this is this side. It has the throttle. Although I think this kit are exact duplicates of each other. So yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of effort to figure out how I'm gonna make these work, because the two halves are exact duplicates of each other, whereas the actual aircraft would be, just gonna get rid of these things. The actual aircraft, the two cockpits would be different depending on the version. As time went on, they didn't, like I said, the initial plan for the twin Mustang was to have two pilots, so one pilot could rest while one pilot was flying on long range missions in the Pacific, escorting B-29s from, you know, some of the islands to and from the mainland. They very quickly realized, as the war was getting near the end, they wouldn't necessarily require those long-range escorts as well. They got bases closer to Japan, so that their flights wouldn't have been as long. So the initial versions had these duplicate cockpits, so one pilot could rest while one flew. Later versions, as they evolved over time, and especially in the Korean War, they stripped the controls out of the one cockpit when it became a night fighter. So I'm gonna have to kind of play around a little bit and see kind of what fits, what doesn't. The left fuselage, which is this one, would have the pilot, whereas this side would have the radar operator. I believe he had basic stick, but no throttle. I'd have to do some more research on that, to be honest. But for now, I'm just gonna clean these up a little bit, get them ready. And then I'll have to figure out, there's also these massive ejector pin markings throughout the inside of this, which I'm gonna try to trim off. I'm not gonna go crazy with it because a lot of them are buried in the fuselage. I just wanna get the worst of them off so that I don't get in the way of anything. But yeah, so anyways, I'm just kind of mumbling here, but my plan is to get the instrument panels, get all the detail off the instrument panels, get them smooth so I can get the proper decals installed. And then same in here, I'm gonna have to kind of figure out what I'm gonna be doing in the cockpits to get these to fit. I might just make it work. Fake it till you make it, as they say. Because this side would be this side, I'm assuming, but they don't line up at all. None of it really lines up. So I don't know. I might just mix and match. Because like this side shows this flat panel, but it doesn't have, but then again, that might be that side. No, because that's the throttle. So that's the throttle. Yeah, I might just have to like stick some pieces in here. Like they want 15 to go up in front. I might be able to make that work in front of the throttle. The throttle itself, I can easily drop that on that. And then fill in with some of the little trim wheels just randomly. So I could probably pull that off. This side, however, doesn't line up at all. They want 14. I might just have to squeeze that into the panel. 11, which is supposed to be down with a radio, doesn't line up at all. I might just shave that area off and stick 11 in there. 18, that, yeah, I'll just have to stick them and just busy it up, basically. Make it look busier than it really is. Same on this side. 13. I might not put 13, actually I'll probably just put 13 up here instead of where it wants it to be. and 11. I'll just have to fake it on this side, which is that one. I'll shave off the throttle, and I'll put number 9. Yeah, number 9 back here, and 17 goes up front. I'll just fake it. Honestly, I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit, fake it, make it look good without actually making it look perfect, because I'm gonna yeah, it is what it is. Adapting parts for a new kit to an old kit is never a perfect science, so I'll do my best. Let's jump to a time lapse here, and I'll continue cleaning this kit up. Try to get the fuselage halves to fit nicely, and then I'll start getting the other things, seats and instrument panels and stuff, and getting ready to start painting the interior of this, the interior green color. So yeah, time lapse. Let's get at it. So as I stated, I just get a start on these cockpits here. I go ahead, clean up the fuselage halves. They need a lot of cleanup. And then I start assembling those cockpit pieces, getting prepared to install those 3D decals in the cockpits. Okay, so just a quick update on the process here. As I'm sure you've seen, I've started assembling bits and pieces of the cockpit for this F-82G. I've started to put in some of the cockpit, the little bits and bobs. I'm gonna have to do a bit of, I did some at the beginning. I'll have to do a bit more kind of research on those 3D decals and see which ones of these and measure and see what fits and what doesn't. I might have to scrape some of the surface detail off on some of these, depending if the decal size matches. If not, I'm just gonna have to kind of wing it. Now, the one thing I did mention, I have two fuselages here since it's a double fuselage aircraft. The one thing I did mention is when you're assembling these, the instructions want you to assemble this and then assemble the nose and then glue it together. But it is very easy to run into a situation where this might not be. You can see for a perfect example how this isn't perfectly aligned down here. And if this piece, the nose, gets assembled and isn't perfectly aligned, when you go to fit them together, you can very easily end up with this really misaligned nose. And you end up with something where the nose is either off this way, or it's off this way, or this way, or in multiple directions, and it starts to look really wonky. So what I like to do is glue these halves together on a flat surface, so I know that this nose and this fuselage is true. And then when I glue the two halves together, if there's any gap, I know it's a curve in the fuselage, and I can sand and I can work and I can make sure that those go together nice and true and that there's no weird curves in it. So as long as I have this gluing surface as flat and true as possible, everything else is relatively easy to deal with. Now, the issue is these fuselages do have a bit of a curve to them. So trying to get them to glue and hold is a little bit of an issue. Now, you can't quite see it, it's just out of frame. You can just make out the edges here. What I'm doing, I have an upper shelf up here that I use for paint storage. I'm sure you've seen it, some of the videos of the kit sitting up here as my, actually, you know what? There we go, look at that. Yeah, just gotta zoom out. There's the upper shelf, and you can see what I've done is actually clamped the fuselage to this flat surface, one on the nose, one just behind the joint, and it's ensured that that is as true and perfectly straight as possible. So you can see now, if I glue the two fuselage halves together, I don't have the nose on the other side, but there's no weirdness in this. This is a true level plane. It also gives me the ability to work on some of these seams before I get everything assembled. So the next one I'm going to do is this side of the fuselage. So this is the left side. This is the pilot's side of the fuselage. And this is the right half. Goes about somewhere like that when it's all said and done. Yeah, so just working my way through that. So I'll show you the process right here as I'm doing this one. So all I've done is just take this nose. I'm putting a little bit of glue on the inside. It has a lip, so I don't want this thick glue to ooze out over the top. So I'm just putting it on the inside corner, so it will sit down inside this valley quite nicely, and you get a good bond between it. And then I'm gonna mount it up here. I'm gonna clamp, I'm gonna get it right to the edge. I'm gonna clamp the nose section down, make sure it's not gonna go anywhere. And then I'm gonna make sure that I'm pushing together and that there's no wiggleness in that. And then I'm gonna clamp, actually, you know what? I gotta flip it. It's an opposite of the other one. So I gotta flip it this way to get the same orientation. So clamp that. You can already see how it's got a little bit. So I wanna make sure that that is nice and square, and that that seam is as straight as possible. All right, and then I'm gonna clamp this half down. And I'm not gonna clamp over the cockpit because it's got an openness. I'm gonna clamp over here where I know it's gonna hold it flat and true. And then I'll take a little bit of this thin, Tamiya thin, and just make sure that seeps down. I'm putting this on really thick and heavy, making sure that seeps down into that seam just as much as possible. You know what? I'm already running into a situation. I'm gonna have to move this one down to here. I really didn't want to be this close to the seam. Already running into issues. This one is not going together as well as the other one did. That is for sure. So that'll hold that seam together, and we'll keep this as true and as flat as possible. I'm just gonna clamp another one back here just to keep adding a few more to this one. It's got a little bit more of a bend to the other side. Okay, so that should hold that together nice, and make sure nothing moves and holds that in place. While that's doing that, I'm just gonna go through here and I'm gonna soak this seam once again with as much liquid glue as I can. I don't want any, you can see here on the bottom here, you know what, now that I'm done, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. Here, actually I'll zoom right in so you can see the work. One of these days I'm gonna get a remote so I don't have to reach up and do that. You can see here, if it will focus. Focus. Why is it not? Okay, right down in here, there's a pretty significant gap. I mean, that's gonna be relatively easy to clean up with just some sandpaper and putty. But I know, again, that I've got a true joint in there, and that's just a variation in the mold. It's not because I've installed this nose crooked. You can take a flat edge, as long as I don't drop the model everywhere, you can take a flat edge and you know, from nose to tail. That's pretty straight, and that's what I want. I want to make sure that that is straight all the way across. There's no bend in that. There's no, look at that. See, that's why I glue the nose half on the fuselage first. I know that's true, and I know that if there's any weird gaps or variations in that seam, it's because of a mold variation and not an assembly problem. So if I do go through here, and that's the other reason why if I start sanding these down and cleaning this up now, before I glue the fuselage halves together, I'm also ensuring that I fix the worst of this, and then going down the road, I can just deal with the middle seam once I get this assembled. It's very easy to get in here and clean this up when I can get a finger on the inside and I don't break a seam and everything, and clean as much of that up as possible. And then when I glue the halves, there's just this seam to worry about, not multiple angles at once and putting pressure in weird places. So once that's all nice and dry, I am gonna go through and start cleaning up this seam, and I'll do the same thing with this half of the fuselage that I have over on this one here that I just glued. That's currently drying. I'll go through and do the same thing. I'll clean up this seam, make sure it's ready to go. There's still a bit of flash along the edges. I'm just gonna go, there's a lip here, kind of some flash is squeezed out. That might clean up more when I glue the fuselage halves together. But I wanna make sure all of that's ready to go. I've still got the other half of the fuselage to do, and I still have a whole other kit because I'm building 2 of these together. There's actually 4 fuselage halves and 4 cockpits I gotta build for these 2 kits. So it's gonna be a little bit of a slog, and I also have to make sure I don't mix up my bits and that I'm not using one kit on the other or filming one kit on the other. I wanna make sure this video is only the G and the other video is only the E, and I'm not mixing up my work. So that's gonna take a little bit of effort to make sure I don't do that. But anyways, I wanna get this seam cleaned up, that seam cleaned up, those seams cleaned up. I wanna get as much of the interior parts cleaned up as possible, and the wheel well and everything, and then go ahead and hit it all with that interior green. That being said, I gotta get the E model ready to go for the interior green paint as well. But anyways, we're slowly getting there. So anyways, we'll jump back into the time lapse and just go along and I'll get the other half of the other fuselage done the same way as this, and I'll start getting seams cleaned up, and I'll plug away at the cockpits and cleaning all that stuff up, and we'll probably jump back into this once I have paint down and I'm starting to get ready to do the 3D cockpit decals. So stay tuned and keep watching. And here you can see I get a little bit of putty laid down on these the seams with the nose section. As much cleanup as I can before I start getting too far into assembly is always easy. Makes the final cleanup that much more easy. So just a little bit while I am at this stage. folks, so we are at a point on this, make sure I get the right one here. We're at a point on this where, for the most part, I am ready to do some interior painting. So that is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start painting interior parts. Don't need that, don't need that. So right now I'm just doing the interior green, which is gonna be cockpits. That's about it, cockpits. So I'm just painting cockpits interior green. The wheel wells will be a zinc chromate color. I'm gonna have to get the tail wheel doors. No, I'll probably paint the tail wheel doors zinc chromate as well. So yes, standard alligator clips, and I will be using Vallejo light green chromate. For the most part, I use Vallejo paints for everything. So yeah, we'll jump into a time lapse here. I'll get all of these clipped up. I'll get into the other room and I'll start painting. Okay, so just getting ready to lay these decals on the inside of the cockpit, and I've mentioned before, but I'll mention again, I'm using Caracal, which is, I got them from the ResKit website. Yeah, I got them from the ResKit website, but it's a Ukrainian company, Caracal. So they do these 3D decals. And I've gone through the instructions. I've kind of looked at the kits. Now, like I said, these are the Modelcraft E model kit. So it's not the Night Fighter kit, so it doesn't have all the bells and whistles in the cockpit for the Night Fighter. But I'm going to try to adapt this set as much as I can to fit. And I don't know exactly how well it's going to work. Some of the pieces are not, there's no panel alignment. A good example is right here. This section right here is supposed to be the left-hand side of the co-pilot or radiator cockpit. And you'll see part 17 is supposed to take up this whole section here. And decal 9, which is the G model one, takes up this whole space here. But if you look at the actual kit, it doesn't match at all with, you know, what it's supposed to look like in there. So I'm just gonna lay the decal over top of what I have, and it's gonna look how it looks. It's not gonna be perfect, but I'm hoping it's better than what the kit has to offer. And with a little bit of, you know, some black wash, some weathering, all that fun stuff, it should work. So it's just a straight decal. I dipped it in water, I let it sit, and now I'm just gonna slide it onto here. I'm gonna seal all of this with Future in the end of the day. So hopefully the adhesive on either the decal itself or with the Future sealant at the end, it should hold it down without an issue. I'm not going to use any decal setting solution. I don't want it to do any weirdness to it. I've never used it before, so I'm just going to use whatever adhesive is on the decal itself, and hope that, like I said, that with a little bit of Future over top. If I have to later on, I can try to white glue it. So I'm just going to cross my fingers and toes and hope that at the end of the day, it all works out. Huge improvement over the base kit. If anybody ever asks me, you know, are these 3D cockpit decals worth it? Yes. I am literally this far into applying them, and I can already tell you that these things are an absolute game changer. I mean, these weren't even made for these. This kit is the decal set is designed for the Modelsvit kit, and this is Modelcraft from 40 years earlier. But I mean, at the end of the day, a kit's a kit. The plane's the plane, and it's a decal, so you can probably go through and, as you can easily see here, make it work, even if it's not perfect. You know, it's better than what the alternative is. So the big issue is going to be on these fuselage halves where they're not designed to fit, and I'm just making it work. I might run into situations where the decals don't want to lay proper, like kind of like here, and I'm just going to have to sort of fudge it and hope that at the end of the day the decals don't lift off. I'm going to try a little bit of decal solution. Now this is Walther's Solvaset. This is the harshest decal solution out there. So I'm just going to bite the bullet and try, because if it ruins the decal, it ruins the decal. This is not necessarily an area that I'm too worried about. It's the inside of the co-pilot's cockpit, and if I have to fudge it, I'll fudge it. But yeah, it's softening up quite nicely, so I'm hoping it will kind of settle in there quite nicely. So I'm not going to do any more than that for now. I'm just going to let it set and harden, and I'll come back later and I'll do the next round. That being said, I am going to prep the next round, which is going to be the lower half. And I already got water on it. Yeah, see, I don't really have a choice now. I'm going to have to install these. I didn't want to, but I got the decal wet, and I don't know how these are going to react to drying and then being re-wet again. Some decals you can let it dry and you can reactivate the adhesive later. Others you can't. And once the decal's wet and then it dries again, that's it. You've used up whatever life was in those decals. So Okay, I'm still gonna get the next round ready because I'm trying my best to have a system. So that's 8, that's 11, so 12. 12 will go on the instrument panel. I have to be careful here because I'm not using the Modelcraft kit. So in these instructions, it calls out this is part H7. Well, I don't have part H7 because I'm using a different kit. So on this side where it's telling you what K24, K20, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm just remembering that this is basically pilots, right side, pilots, left side, co-pilots, right side, co-pilot's left side, and this is going to be the pilot's right side. So I'm just remembering that, but I have to keep that straight in my mind while I'm working. So that was 14. So I'm going to do 11. I want to put 11 in there. Okay. So I'm going to do 11. And then I'm also going to do 9. Okay, and that will be it for the next round. And I'm gonna put that way out of the way so it doesn't get wet. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there, let everything dry. I'll come back in a little bit, I'll get the next of it. I'm gonna finish off all these decals just in time lapse, so we'll come back in a bit and see how it works.
Okay, so poking away here at these 3D decals that I'm using for the cockpit. Couple of lessons I have learned. One, I basically started off by saying how I need to be very careful that I keep my fuselage halves organized. To be perfectly honest, I should have labeled them with an R and an L for left and right so I knew which side was which. Because the very first thing I did was I started shaving. So this is the left cockpit, the right half of the left cockpit. You can tell by the way the horizontal stabs fit. And I had cleaned up part of that. So this is the left half of the left fuselage, and this is the left half of the right fuselage. And the pieces on the inside are different. And I cleaned this half up already, the left half of the right fuselage. I had cleaned up ready to add the decals. And when I picked it up, I picked up the left half of the left fuselage, said, hey, that's not right. And I started shaving off some of the interior detail. And I realized I shaved it off the wrong kit. So, and then I glued the pieces on. I glued these pieces onto this fuselage half, and I had to go peel them all off and glue them onto the right one. And now I got to go through and clean up with the paint and retouch all that up and everything. So I literally started off by saying, hey, make sure you don't get everything mixed up, and then turned around and did exactly what I said no one else should do. So lesson learned there. Other thing I have learned, these decals don't necessarily like to be bent. I've had a few that have broken. They don't take to solve a set basically at all. They do not act like real decals. For the most part, once they are off the backing sheet, they act a lot more like photo etch than decals. And you can kind of see that here just as I'm trying to get this belt to glue down. It doesn't act like a decal. It's very stiff. It very much wants to keep its original shape. It doesn't want to twist or bend very much. They tend to crack very easily. Like here, it just broke on the back side while I was trying to glue that front side on. The decal does not want to conform at all to these tight radius bends. So you've got to be very careful. See, it broke over here as well. So my recommendation is, if you're planning to use these 3D decals, don't use them for seat belts. If you're looking to make seat belts, or you get seat belts, it's very much worth your time to invest and work with pre-painted photo etch. And I'm pretty sure you can buy sheets of pre-painted just seat belts, just sheets and sheets of seat belts, and you're much better to go that route for belts like this on seats than you are to mess around like I am right now with these pre-made decals that just don't. I mean, I'm treating them like photo etch. I'm doing the same super glue, accelerator. I'm doing exactly what I would be doing if I was attempting to glue down photo etch, except it would most likely cooperate a lot better than what these are. So yeah, my recommendation, just use photo etch. Yeah, pieces popped off. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You get one, pops up somewhere else. You put it down, pops up somewhere else. Luckily, I have some accelerator handy, so I'm just working my way across. Anyways, I'm not going to sit here and just mumble anymore and whatnot. I'm going to jump in. Oh my God. yeah, I'm very close to just giving up and ripping these off. I mean, I've already got a bunch in place, so it's a little hard now, but oh my God, this is utterly ridiculous. Anyways, jump to a time lapse and we'll get this done.
So here I'm starting to get the zinc chromate painted. I needed the insides of the tail wheel areas painted before I could assemble the fuselages. So I might as well go ahead and paint the main gear as well as all the gear doors all at the same time. And now that we've got all of those interior areas painted, I'll go ahead and get a black wash done on it. That's just going to put some shadows into the corners and just dirty everything up. I'll then go through after that and do a dry brush pass and highlight and lighten the upper parts. You've got a base color green, you then have a dark corner, and then you have a light top surface, and it gives it some gradient and depth to everything and just makes everything like pop. Again, it's a pretty standard modeling technique. I do it in all the kits. You'll see it done by a lot of people. So that's just the step that I'm at now. And here I start assembling these cockpits. Now, the kit being the potato that it is, there's not a lot of positive location in the cockpit area for the pieces. So you'll see where I kind of glue some parts together, and then I clamp or tape the fuselage together in order to ensure that the pieces dry in the proper alignment. And then I'll open it up, glue the next piece on, then the next piece. And I'm constantly using the fuselages themselves as a jig to ensure that those cockpits are lined up, because otherwise it is very easy to glue these things completely out of the they're not technically square, but out of square in the sense that they're not in the proper angle.
Okay, so a quick update here before I move on any farther. As you see, I've been poking away at the fuselage, just kind of getting things ready to be assembled, and I'm more or less at the point where I can glue the fuselages together. Looking through the instructions, doesn't seem like there's really anything else left to do on the fuselage halves, so I can most likely get these glued together and then start working on fuselage seams, because there's a lot of fuselage seams that need to be cleaned up. The one interesting thing I've been poking away, so first of all, there's a little cover on the nose in here, a little insert to fill in the backspace behind the oil cooler, or that's probably the carburetor intake. Yeah, oil cooler's back here, so that's the carburetor intake. So there's a little insert you put in there
no locating pins at all. It's just kind of glue it in place and hope you get it level. So once I get that assembled, there's going to be quite a bit of cleanup I'll need to do up in here and blending all that kind of stuff, but I'll deal with that once I get the fuselage glued together. The bigger issue is the insert here at the back for the radiator. Again, there's very little positive connection. All you have right back here is kind of a straight line. Everything else up in front or up inside is just kind of sitting there, and you got to do your best to get it level. And I more or less just looked down the line and I made sure the gaps on the side were somewhat even. Then you have your housing doors, and they kind of slip in like that, and you can adjust whether you want the doors open or closed. But there's an interesting situation that's coming about when I'm doing this. So I'm going to zoom the camera in here just a touch so you can kind of look and see what I'm seeing. So if you look at the instructions, the door shows itself as a little triangular door, right? Flat on one side, triangular, and even here when you look at the difference, you see it kind of hinges at this point, open, and then as it closes, it slides. If you look at the piece you get, it has these big extensions on either side. And if you look at the way the kit is designed, get something I can point with. There's the up, so you can see there's this kind of upper wall, ceiling piece down inside. Let's see if you can see down in there. Get some light. There we go. Down inside is the actual radiator, but the sides are open. And if you used a triangle, you would see up inside, and you would see this big open space on either side. So I suspect, and now the other side of that, before I go any farther, if you look at this piece, let me get the light back out of the way here. If you look at this piece, there's this really steep step on either side where the two pieces really don't match. And I'll zoom in really tight here so you can see what I'm looking at. Right? So you can see this is kind of the triangular door, and the instructions show this piece moving like this, and all of this plastic doesn't appear in the instructions. And if you look across the back here, you can see there's this lip, and it's almost like this plastic door is just sitting on top of this big chunk of plastic. And I honestly think it is. My theory, based off of some of the other weirdness I've seen with this kit, was that this door was supposed to be a triangle, exactly as you see it here in the instructions. But when it was open, you could look down inside and you would see this gap and see up inside the fuselage, and that didn't look realistic. So what he did is they went in the mold after the fact and added a big section on top to hide that hole, to hide this hole inside. So this big piece was scabbed on by milling out the mold, and that's how they did it. And that's how you end up with this weird hunk of plastic. Now what that means is where, basically I'll use a piece of red marker here.
Why are you using those?
So I'll use this marker here and I'll show you what I think happened is this triangle, this door piece was the original piece, and then they took the other half of the mold and they milled out a section and added all that piece in red, got added to. So my theory is that they added all of this section in red, right around this line here. Everything down here in red was added. And what happens when they did that, because they did it in two halves and it wasn't molded like that from the first place, there's a lip here. And I think all of this lip here that's marked in red is extra plastic that doesn't actually belong there.
So it's causing the door, and I'll draw across this side so you can see what I'm talking about. I think the line goes somewhere about here and all of that. So everything that's marked in red was added on after a test shot, after the molds were created. So it's causing this huge misstep in everything. And then this lip, and you'll see now that I've explained everything, why I think it's happening, is if you put this together, it doesn't fit. You see this big, massive gap right there. See the huge, huge gap that forms right there? That shouldn't be there. That should be flat. And it's happening because of this little bump that sticks out, and it's impacting the side of the fuselage. Now, if you get it to fit underneath, now if you look from the top, there's a massive step. It doesn't fit right. So I'm gonna have to go through and sand off all of this extra plastic, clean it all up, and then get a nice flat fit on one side. And then you can see how that extra plastic actually serves a purpose by filling in the extra holes. Because if that I'll go on the inside. If I mark, well, I can't really mark the inside, but you can understand why they did that, because you would have this weird gap on the side that doesn't exist, and it fills in and covers. It's hard to get right because of the fit. But anyways, my theory is that's what's happened. They went in after the fact and they added a piece to they ground out more mold to allow a thicker plastic, and it just created a monster of a piece. As I've mentioned a few times, this kit's a potato. You can just see the gaps that are here. It's all doesn't want to line up properly. All these seams up here, like that's tight as it goes, and there's all of these massive seams everywhere that still need to be cleaned up. The tail back here is just like inches thick in real life and tons of over mold, and it's gonna take a lot. It is going to take a lot, but I'll get there. I will get there. But yeah, it's just sanding, and I'll clean it all up and some putty and some Mr. Surfacer, and just do everything I can to clean this up and make it look as good as possible. At least the cockpits are looking really, really good. I'm really happy with those. It's just all of these external seams are not going to be easy. So we're plugging away on it. These I'm not going to worry about right now. I can install these well after the fact. That was just a quick update on kind of where I'm seeing things fall. But just looking at these instructions now, step 1 is done, step 2 is done. I still have to do the instrument panels, but I'll be playing with those in a bit. 3 is done. 4, I've kind of modified that assembly. 5, I'm not going to glue those the little door piece in yet. I'm going to do that later. As I just mentioned. 6 tail wheel doors, again, I'm going to glue in later. 7 and 8 with the tail wheel, again, I've modified the kit so I can install those after the fuselage is assembled. And the next step is assembling the fuselage. So other than instrument panels, my next step will be gluing the fuselage together, getting the instrument panels glued in, well, gluing in the instrument panels, gluing the fuselage together, and I'm going to take a long time to work my way around and make sure it's got a nice tight fit everywhere around the kit so I don't run into any of these problems going forward. And I'll clean my desk. Okay, so yeah, we'll move forward. We'll get the fuselages glued together, get these instrument panels in, and keep plugging along.
Just a quick little update here as I'm poking away at this, slowly working my array around and gluing this together, and you'll see some creative clamping. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This kit is a potato. The fit is horrible, seams are brutal. Basically, I'm just trying to get everything. That last clamp, I was trying to push this doghouse kind of radiator upper part down while I was clamping this closed to get the seam to close up properly. There's going to be quite a bit of, not so worried down here. These sides are going to seal it up pretty nicely, and there's a good seal back here, but across this spine there's not much holding it in place, so I'm going to have to get down inside with some super glue, and I'm going to use a little bit of baking powder or baking soda. Really make sure that that seam has a good solid structure behind it, so it doesn't decide to pop later on when I'm starting to twist and pry and stuff like that. So that's going to have to get done. And right now I'm just going to work my way across the nose. I think I'll do the upper half first and then the lower half second. It's easy to get in here and clamp this and get squeezing down here, but up top I don't have a lot of clamping force without them popping and knocking this. So it's going to be easier to glue the top part first, get a good seal there, and then I can clamp right there nice and tight across that wing, and that's going to hold that lower half together while it sets. So I think that's going to be the plan. And yeah, the scary thing is, which I keep kind of forgetting, I'm working on an F-82, so there's 2 fuselages, but I'm also building 2 F-82s at once, so I have 4 fuselages. So every time I fight with something like this and I get past something, you know, and I get the seam fixed or I get the problem solved or what have you, then it's like, oh yeah, there's another one. Oh wait, no, there's another 3 that has to be done. It won't be so hard once I get through these fuselages because the wings are the same. There's 2. So it's going to start cutting down that level of repetitiveness, but right now it's just a lot of repetition, a lot of the same thing again and again and again, and it's just the nature of the beast when you're doing F-82s. There, that's got a nice tight seam on it. Helps if the nose one will stick. Gonna drop a bit of extra thin on that seam. Make sure that entire seam has a nice deep. And you'll notice that the instrument shroud, it's pretty wide. I'm hoping that there's no issues with the canopy when it goes to fit in. I can always squeeze back here a little bit to try to get this to come together after this front part dries. That's just the misalignment with the nose pieces. As much as I tried to get them lined up properly, there's always a little bit of misalignment. But anyways, let it sit, let it dry, start it again soon. Oh yeah, and the fit, remember I talked about being a potato? Look at this. So look at the tail. The leading edge is perfectly lined up. Come on, focus. Is this not focusing at all? Yeah, see the leading edge? Perfectly lined up, no issues across the top, no issues across the bottom. Look at that trailing edge. Look how much plastic is sticking out on that trailing edge. The fit is brutal. There's a couple of mil just sticking out, hanging out the backside. It looks like it's just over mold, over like flash. But anyways, it's gonna take a little bit of work to get this looking good. So yeah, as I said, I still have another one I have to glue together, and then another 2. But hopefully we're gonna get there. So anyways, that's that. I'll let this dry. We'll come back here in a couple hours and glue the bottom half together. So at this point, you can see I'm starting to get that center wing section lined up. I'm making sure they fit properly, that the openings on both the bottom of the fuselage as well as the mating points or the mating surfaces of that center wing section are squared up as best as possible to ensure everything does fit the way you want. Now, there's no easy way to get this aircraft to fit square. I couldn't come up with an easy way. I'm pretty sure one of my fuselages are tilted a little bit, but the lower wing surface has a bit of a warp to it, and the fuselages have a bit of a warp to them just out of the mold, so it's very difficult to square everything up. So it's just one of those, if it looks okay, I'm happy with it.
And here I'm doing that final little bit of work that's needed just to get those mating surfaces as square and true as possible on the fuselage and the center section. I've gotten the upper wing glued on to that center section, and then I go ahead, I glue the fuselage on. You'll see I use quite a bit of clamps to again hold everything tight. The gaps were massive. You'll see as I move on here how much work was required to get those seams to clean up and line up properly. They were just horrendous. So lots of clamping. I wasn't too worried about lining up the skin. I was more worried about getting the mating surfaces tight and get them glued together. And I will deal with everything else later with putty and super glue and all that other fun stuff. And here I start working with the vacuum form canopies. I'm not always a big fan of vacuum form, but as this model was going to be built with the canopies open and the kit canopies are like a mile thick if you scaled them up, I decided to go with the vacuum form. So it takes a little bit of practice. Luckily, I've used them enough that I've gotten it down to a point that I'm happy with how things turn out. But you got to be very careful with the cutting, and it's very difficult to sand, and they're squishy, so it's hard to get proper shape when you're trying to sand. But anyways, you'll see here I start working on getting those forward sections cleaned up and installed.
So it has been a bit since I've done any kind of real update on this kit, and I figure now is probably a better time than any to do it, as I'm plugging away at probably the most annoying part of doing this the way I'm doing it anyways, and that is the canopies, and that's because I'm using a vacuum form canopy rather than the kit canopies. It just looks a bit better when you're doing them open. The kit canopies are a little garbage. The kit is a little garbage. So it's just taken me a bit to get them cleaned up and get them installed. It's going to be a real fun job getting these. Apologies for the cough and the cold. To get these pieces, the canopy frames, the main canopy frames inside the main canopy, because there's no real positive location. It's going to be a lot of white glue and just fingers crossed and hope for the best, but I'm gonna have to, you know, figure it out and get it in there. But anyways, yeah, long story short, it's gonna be a bit of work to get this all put together and whatnot and assembled. So these, at least I got the forward bits done. They're more or less sitting where they need to be sit. I'm gonna have to future those and then super glue them in place, and then mask off the canopies themselves, and then do some cleanup on the seams around them, and then it'll be ready for paint. As I said, these have a little bit more work to go on them. The kit itself, as it is, it's been a bit of work. I'll get these off before I lose them. It's been a bit of work to get to where they are, and if you've been watching me do this, you've seen the amount of effort I've put in to getting this cleaned up, and I still don't know what a lot of these seams are going to look like until I get a coat of primer on it, which is why I'm kind of working on canopies right now. If I can get the canopies installed and cleaned up, I can get those, get some green painted on them. And then I'm basically ready for a coat of primer. I know I still need to do a bit of work on this one. The rest of these seem to be okay. This one here maybe needs a little bit more putty on one side. That one seems okay. Again, I'm not going to really know until I get them primed what some of these seams look like. I know I need a little bit here. I know I need a bit more here and a bit more here. I might need a bit more here. In here looks like I might need a bit more. This side looks okay. I'll probably That doesn't look too bad. I might need some more here. But I want to get a good coat of primer on it and just see what we look like. The tail, the horizontal stab, I have it here. Luckily, I am able to squeeze it out, pop it in place, and then I'll just have to clamp. I was playing around with this the other day on how I'm going to clamp it, and I think I'm going to have to put together a bit of like a clamp. Chain, something like this, to get this clamped down properly. Something like that, and then I can get the glue in there. Luckily, everything seems to be straight. The horizontal stabs and the wing are nice and straight, so everything seems to be going together well. But there's the basics of, so again, there's going to be a lot of work left. But I mean, I'm going to have a lot of voiceover as I'm going over on this, as I'm doing the bits and pieces. So a lot of the ins and outs of how I got to here, you should see already. But there's just a lot of work. There's a lot of test fitting required. There's a lot of clamping, a lot of puttying and sanding, and just playing with angles. I've used quite a bit of super glue with a bit of that baking powder or baking soda to make sure that it really solidifies and locks in where I need it to be locked in, and really holds it. I've still got the intakes to do. Mask off the wheel wells, hit it with primer. I've got the radar pod out. I've been starting to figure out that doesn't have a lot of positive location. So I think I might not glue that on until, luckily the fit is really nice. There's only a little bit of seams under there, and just a tiny little bit of Mr. Surfacer should hide the worst of that. So that goes on quite nicely, if I might say so myself. So I gotta be careful, I don't want to snap this. But anyways, it does need a bit of sanding to smooth down some of the ridges on it. But yeah, that I will super glue in place a little closer to the end. Probably before I get the outer wings installed, but once the fuselage is primed and I'm happy with all the seams in on this main fuselage, then I'll go ahead and glue that in place, get that seam cleaned up, and then I can install the outer wings. Like I said, this has some ridges, some printing artifacts, so it does just need a quick sanding just to knock those edges down. I'm going to use the sanding stick. I don't think the sandpaper's got enough. This is a weird plastic. I've never really dealt with 3D printed stuff before. These ridges don't really seem to want to sand off at all. Anyways. This is just a first hit. I've still got a bit of work to do. I think a good coat of primer will do a lot of good on that too. I'll probably hit that with some Tamiya primer. It tends to go down nicer and sand easy. So yeah, I'll hit that with some Tamiya primer, sand that down, get that glued in place. But yeah, no, we're moving right along on this, so it's looking really good. Pretty happy with how it's turned out. I'm hopeful it's gonna look good. Like I said, you can start to see the canopies coming together. So something like, you know, that, and then this side will be, and then I still have to cut this one, but I'll have both sides open. I think it's gonna be a really nice looking kit. I'm pretty happy with it. Luckily, a lot of this work that I'm playing with in the cockpit, I don't have to worry so much on the other one, because it's just gonna be closed. I'm just using the kit cockpit, so just slam them together and move on. And I don't have the radar pods to work with and stuff like that, so it'll be a little easier to assemble everything. But yeah, I think the main thing I just wanted to touch base and just kind of say is just take your time, be careful with it, don't rush. It is not an easy kit. I mean, honestly, if you're out there and you want to build an F-82, I just recommend getting the Modelcraft version. It's not really worth, for what you'll pay for the Modelcraft version, it's worth it versus fighting the way I'm fighting with this thing to get it together. So it's probably worth it just to buy the Modelcraft and move on. Yeah, anyways, we're getting there. It's starting to look like an F-82. Still a little whiles to go, some more work to be put into it. But I think when it's all done, it's gonna look really, really, really good. I'm very happy. Yeah, anyways, so stay tuned. We'll keep plugging away at this. Like I said, I'm gonna keep working away on this cockpit, get that trimmed out. The next thing I wanna do is go ahead and get some future on this, because when you super glue it, it tends to just wanna fog. So get some future on that, let them dry, and then I'm gonna have to play with getting these ready to go and fit in. I'll paint them, I'll clean them up, paint them black, or green, maybe probably black. I don't know, probably green, because it's yeah, it's pre-woods. It's they wouldn't have repainted the cockpit, so I'll paint them green, and then clean them up, paint them green, weather them. While I'm doing that, I can weather these instrument combings. I'll get these glued into the main cockpit sections, clean those up, get them ready. Then I can glue these forward ones on, get those seams cleaned up and ready, and then I can mask it all off and get prepared for primer. And then once the primer's done, clean up seams, then I get this installed. Then I gotta get the tail installed. Again, seams and primer. And then I gotta get the wings finished off, get them installed, seams and primer, and then it's ready for paint. And then I gotta do it all again. So anyways, getting there. I've still got to clean up the radiator doors. I'm still running into those issues where they are not fitting right. I got to clean up all of these seams, get everything in there nice and tight, make sure it's going to look good. So I got there's so much work. There's so much work. Anyways, yeah, it's getting there. So stay tuned. We'll keep plugging away at this, and hopefully at the end of this, it'll look good. So keep watching.
And here you'll see I start getting those interior frames glued on. I have to kind of, I clip them into the little paint clips and then I get them glued on. I use super glue and accelerator to make sure they all line up. Again, the shape of the shape of the canopy and the shape of that interior frame weren't even close. I ran into the same issue on the E with the kit parts. It's just very difficult to get everything lined up. There's so little positive alignment on this kit. It just took forever to get them looking decent and then get them assembled and get ready. And then after that, you'll see I start working on that center radar pod. It's a 3D printed piece, I think I mentioned earlier, and it comes out with a lot of ridges and needs a lot of work. So you'll see I start adding a bit of putty, and I kind of give it a skim coat of putty in order to hide as many ridges as possible. And then it's just a lot of sanding back and forth to make sure it looks good.
So quick update on the progress of this kit here. Just finished with the canopies. I got the internal frames super glued in. I am using these vacuum form canopies, so it's a little bit harder to fit. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It was no harder to fit than the actual canopy, but no, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. The fit was about the same as what it was on the actual canopy. I did get a little bit of super glue on the inside of this one. I'm just gonna have to live with that. I can't really do much about it, but those are glued into place. I hit it with some accelerator to lock it in. Once it's dry, I'll go through again with a bit more super glue in there, make sure all of that seam is nice and tight. I have quite a bit of give on the inside, so I can jam glue down inside here to some extent without worrying about ruining the canopy. So I'm gonna do that and fill that in, and then I don't have to go too crazy with these because they are going to be mounted open, and I'll mask off the canopy while I'm doing painting. So this I just have to worry about. I can take it off the clip. You can just see how it's going to look. I'm just going to have to, once it's all said and done, a little bit of white glue them open like that. So I don't have to worry too much about that. It's just now masking and getting them painted, but I can focus on them separately, and I don't have to necessarily deal with them as I'm working because I will be... What is that and why is that happening? I will be doing these open. So I just wanted to see, the main question was how would they all fit together, and they went together relatively okay. So I'm going to, I think was that, oh no. That's damage from the alligator clips. Okay, I gotta get these alligator clips off. They're ruining the plastic. I did not expect that to happen. Anyways. Yeah, the internal frames have been glued in. My next step is going to be getting them masked off, getting them painted. I might even do that. I don't know if I'm going to push it to the end or get them done soon and just put them away and then have them put away. But there's kind of the final look with them open. So I'm glad I finally got those done. That was a big hurdle, a mental leap that I had been dreading. But that is now done. Just a little bit of work needs to be done with the super glue to make sure they're locked in. I haven't really touched the fuselages in a while, as you've seen. I'm going to have to get those forward canopies installed, get those seams cleaned up, get those masked, mask off all of this. Probably just jam a whole bunch of Kleenex and some, across here I can mask with some masking tape, and in here and across the top, and some Kleenex down inside here to hide it all. But that's kind of my next step, is getting this ready for paint. I'm probably going to paint with an airbrush when I do the other one green. I'll spray paint this back section here, and then I can mask it off with masking tape after, and then paint the rest of the color with it all being masked off, and not really worry about ruining the paint job. So I'll probably do it that way. yeah, other than that, I gotta start masking off wheel wells, get those outer wings done, and then start hitting it with some primer and moving right along. So that's coming along as well. So that's kind of the status on that one. Haven't been doing as much, been focusing on the other kits more than I have on this one here. But yeah, so let's keep going. Next up, I'm gonna start working getting those forward canopies installed.
And then you see here I start masking, getting prepared to get a coat of primer down. I made custom masks with my Cricut, and I used the kit parts as a guide. And if you watch the E model, you'll see me using those on that. The vacuum form had a slightly different shape, and the masks didn't fit. So as you see, I used some Tamiya tape to fill in the differences and ensure that I got full coverage on the masking. I then go ahead and mask off the actual openings and get prepared for all of that. And then it's just a slog of putty, sand, prime, putty, sand, prime, all that other stuff, just to clean up as many of the seams as I can in preparation for the first coat of primer. And here I am gluing in that horizontal stabilizer. As I mentioned earlier, it looks like I got a bit of a twist in the fuselage, so they don't quite fit in there very well. And you'll see I have to kind of clamp it. I use 2 clamps together. I kind of lock them together and clamp across themselves to get enough width and tension to hold that in place. And then when that was all said and done, I used a little bit of Mr. Surfacer and a little bit of putty to clean those seams up. And again, as you can see, I'm just going back and forth, cleaning up seams and getting prepared for a final coat. And then here you'll also notice start to get the wings glued together, those outer wing panels. I get them cleaned up and prepared for install. And you'll also see when I do install those wings, I use a jig. There's a bit of a foam core jig. I built that up. If you watch that E model time lapse, you'll actually see the part in there where I build that jig. And then I go through and get them, and it's luckily it's the same kit, so it was really easy to use that jig just to get those outer wing panels, and that ensured that both wings, while the dihedral might not be perfect, might be a little too much, a little too little. I haven't done the actual measured it out and got it perfect, but the point is both wings will look the same and both kits will look the same so that they look consistent. And once again, as is a common theme with this kit, once I get those outer wings glued on, there's just a whole bunch of putty and sand and super glue and cleaning, and the fit is horrible on this. One of the wings, I believe, actually had very little contact point, and so it basically didn't bond at all with the plastic cement. It was almost completely being held together by super glue. So it took quite a bit to go through, and especially with the inside of the wing. The bottom had a pretty bad step to it. Took a little bit to get that cleaned up and try to make it look okay. And then the upper wing is really hard to get in there and clean up that seam with the fuselage shape. Especially with the width of the fuse. It's just a weird shaped plane to work on. So anyways, I go through and get that done, and then after that it's just some of the final little bits, things like the radiator intake, the face of the radiator, all that kind of stuff gets to be cleaned up, and then just a short hop, skip, and a jump, and then it's ready for paint.
So here we are at the point of the video where I think I'm ready to wrap up part 1. That's the end of what we're currently watching if you haven't been paying attention. The aircraft is pretty much done. Well, ready for paint. I went ahead and sanded all those little imperfections that I just finished puttying. I am pretty happy with how this looks right now. Like I said, I am going to go ahead and paint it. I'm not going to paint it. It's going to be the Night Fighter. It'll be something similar to this one here. I think I'm doing Gruesome Twosome is what I chose for this. So it's going to have the yellow script on the sides, like Gruesome Twosome, all Night Fighter with the red markings. I'm not going to paint this full black. This is kind of flail black, but I'm going to use Panzer Gray, which is a really, really dark gray. And the reason why I'm going to do that as the overall color, one, it gives it a scale effect. If you paint it black, it's going to look really dark. You go with the dark gray, it scales nicely when you look at smaller aircraft. Second, I'm going to pre-shade with true black. I'm going to go through and pick out some of the panel lines, whatnot, just to vary the color. And then when you hit it with that Panzer Gray, you'll be able to see some of those dark and lightened panel lines and give it just a little bit of variance in the color. And then also when you have things like propeller blades, wheels that are flat black, they'll have a little bit of contrast with the actual fuselage, which gives it just a little bit of a dynamic look. And then when you start weathering everything, it gets really exciting. So that's the plan for this. So my next step is going to be some pre-shading, hitting it all with the Panzer Gray, and then just looking, and if I have to do some sanding and cleanup, it's really easy to just retouch everything up and go ahead that way. So that's kind of what I want to do, and just get this thing painted. The quicker I get a base coat on here, the quicker I can start to pull some of these maskings off, and I can make sure that all of the little details look good. Start getting things like landing gears glued on, get this thing standing up. The big issue is going to be this. I have no idea how well this is going to turn out. I got to do a little bit of cleanup on the panel lines, and then it's going to have to be glued on after the fact. But I need this on its landing gear because I can't really put it down when this is installed. So that's going to take a little bit of effort to make sure that everything's set up properly before I move on to that next step. So if you can't hear in the background, my kids are not the happiest at the moment, so I gotta go upstairs and figure out what battle we're fighting today. So I'm gonna wrap this up here. If you want to see part 2 of this video, down below in the description, part 2 should be linked. If it isn't linked yet, that's either because I forgot or I'm not finished part 2 yet. It's going to take a few months from this point in my life until I get part 2 finished. So if you don't see part 1 down below, take a look back in a little while, or just hop over to the playlist and see if I put it in there if I forgot the link. And if I have forgot the link, message me, send me a comment. I'll make sure I get that link put up. So we'll wrap it up there. That's part 1. As I said, part 2 is going to involve all of the pre-shading, painting, decaling, weathering, and the final touches to get this thing display ready. So on that note, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.